This is the X-Maker Joy 3D printer. A 3D printer that, strange as it may seem, did not bring me joy, but that I still had such a good time using that there will be a recommendation for you all at the end of this video. But let me explain. Hey everybody, it's Joe the 3D Printing Professor, and if you're new to 3D printing or want something new to do with 3D printing, you're in the right place. I hope that you'll subscribe and stick around and maybe come join me on my Discord, where I have a great community of people who are doing great things with 3D printing and helping others do great things as well. I hope to see you there. Longtime viewers may remember that a little while back I reviewed the X-Maker 3D printer non-Joy version, and that 3D printer was fun and glowy and in the end kind of split my recommendation. It was not as easy to maintain as the Adventurer 3, so maybe not so great for maker spaces, but it made 3D printing super easy to use, and so it almost was better than the Toy Box 3D printer, a 3D printer that I have made available to my kids and they use all the time. But whereas the Toy Box skewed, I feel, very young, the X-Maker skewed just a little bit older and had the capability to grow with your children as they grow up. And now the X-Maker Joy kind of promises to fit that same niche, but at a cheaper price point. And how do they make it cheaper? By cutting some serious corners. The X-Maker Joy, in addition to being a little bit smaller than the X-Maker 3D printer, is also a headless 3D printer, meaning that on this machine there is no screen, no interface, no buttons whatsoever. If you want to interact with this 3D printer to do anything, including loading and unloading filament, it has to be done through the app. But to AOSeed's credit, their app now runs on tablets, phones, or even computers, all of which you can access this 3D printer from and do whatever you need to with it. So it's super easy to put a device next to this machine because there's so many devices that you can put through it. But still, it kind of left something to be desired. Anytime I wanted to, like I said, load and unload the filament, I had to leave this machine and go to another device to do it. And in the end, I just ended up dedicating a device to using this machine. Well, AOSeed could have given me a screen and that would have saved me from having to do that. It feels like being a headless machine means that this machine comes with homework. But once I got it set up, once the app was ready to go and everything was connected, that's where the fun began. See, last time that I reviewed the X-Maker non-Joy, I said that their app was good, that it showed a lot of promise, but that it really needed to have some work put into it. And AOSeed has absolutely put the work into it. And that app has gone from being good to being really, really good. Now, I'll go into some detail about why their app is so good, but I also wanted to mention that AOSeed sent me some of these kits that they've been developing. They've got kits to make remote-controlled cars. They've got kits to make pullback cars. They've got this really fun one where you can make a music box. And then they've got the X-Fun kit, and this kit is the one. It comes with a variety of parts. But my experience with the X-Maker Joy actually started with their music box kit. Now, before I could get to this, though, I needed to run some test prints. I did the setup, got it set up on my Wi-Fi through the app, the way you have to do it. And then, as starting a test print, I wanted to test print a whistle because, one, whistles are fun, and two, it's a very small print. However, the first time I printed it, it detached from the print bed and came out super ugly. Being an experienced 3D printer that I am, I understood exactly what happened here. The bed was too far away from the nozzle and it wasn't attaching onto there. I needed to, what we call, level the bed. A misnomer, it's more of tramming. However, going into the app and finding the ability to level the bed, it's buried in there. And then when you hit it, when you say level the bed, it tells you not to do it. Not exactly, but it kind of says this is for advanced users. be careful doing this and stuff. And I'm going, no, this is I need to do this to get this 3D printer to work. Don't tell me not to do this. Now, to tell the truth, this is just a language issue and something that AOSeed can and probably will fix in a future update. But it's one of those things, if you're not going to have auto bed leveling on your 3D printer, you're going to have to tell people that they need to level it, and you're going to have to teach them to do it, hold their hand through that process. I would have much preferred a next-gen 3D printer with this, one that I didn't have to level because it does it all by itself. But that's not what this is. Again, they were cutting corners, and that's another one of the corners that they cut. Not bad, just mentioning it as part of the experience. And another one of those times when I just wasn't getting joy from the experience of using this 3D printer. However, once I had the bed leveled, I was able to print my whistle just fine. And in fact, I was able to turn off the raft in the slicer settings, something that I now have to do at the beginning of every print because it doesn't save your settings. Again, just little niggles, but nevertheless, the whistle printed fine directly on the print bed, and okay, the whistle doesn't work. But that's all right. The whistle wasn't my goal. My goal was to print the music box. Now, this music box print is a large one with multiple pieces, and it came with a quarter spool of rainbow filament, which actually was an excellent choice. It meant that the different parts were going to be different colors, and I didn't need to change filament. I actually really enjoyed that. The problem was, I only got through about a couple of pieces here, the bottom, an interface piece, and then I was working on this central tower when that quarter spool of filament ran out and there was not enough to finish the print. Now, this isn't really that big of a deal. Those quarter spools of filament are not meant to last. They're just meant to kind of get you into it a little bit. But I do try in these videos reviews to set expectation. And so if you buy the X Maker Joy or the full-size X Maker, then you're probably going to want to get some additional filament. And I finished off this print, and in fact did all of the prints that I did on this 3D printer with a spool of matte rainbow PLA from my friends at SliceWorks. I'll have a link in the description where you can check that out. So with the rainbow matte PLA loaded up, I continued to print pieces for this print. And I gotta say, this is not a next-gen 3D printer. This print was taking days, almost a full week to finish. And if I were a kid working on this, like I say, this skews a little bit older. It requires an audience that is willing to put in a little bit of time, a little bit of patience to do it, but the anticipation was wonderful. And seeing it grow piece by piece as it printed was, to me, I thought, very rewarding. Now, while I was working on this, occasionally I'd get to a point where I'm ready to start the next part, but the colored filament had not transitioned to the next color yet, so I dove into their library of objects to find a small print that I can use to let the filament transition, and they have some really fun parts. They have this cool sliding puzzle or articulated dragons, and then I saw a disc shooter that was credited as coming from printables. Yes, they are borrowing prints from other places, but they are making sure to attribute those prints, and that's pretty good. Mostly, because while they do tell you where they got the file from, it's a text link that you can't click on, which is an interesting choice. Now, I was able to track down where this disk launcher came from and found out that there was a lot of remixes of it, upgrades to it, and I was able to use those upgrades to make a better version of it. So their app pointed me in the right direction, but it would have been nice if it were a clickable link at least. Eventually, the carousel finished, and once I put it all together with the music box on the inside, "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" is a interesting choice, but overall, it's a super satisfying project and it worked great. In addition to a library of 3D print files that you can just say, ooh, I want that, and the printer makes it, the XMaker app also has a section of building toys. Now, I don't mean the section of their app that has like a sculpting app or a Tinkercad-like app, although they do have a sculpting app and a Tinkercad-like app in their app. So they got that going on. But no, they also have this library of customizable toys of different kinds that you could just go hog on. At first, I was fascinated with their top app, which enabled you to draw the shape of your top, and then it would lathe it around for you and you could 3D print it. You could make tops big or small. My first top that I made, I wanted to kind of move the mass to the furthest outside, but make that mass as big as possible. Unfortunately, I didn't put the spinny part down far enough, so this piece doesn't actually spin. It keeps on hitting the walls there. Not a great top. I made a much smaller one, and this one spins better. But then they also have these cute little things that you can decorate it with, and you can even draw and customize your own. This part of the app is the part that I'm talking about that'll keep kids busy for a long time. Next, I wanted to try their airplane making app, but I decided for this one I was going to do it like a kid. And if you let me put Legos on there, I was going to put Legos all over here. I was going to put things on the top, the bottom, the side, the wings, everything. I was going to make this pretty much as unprintable as possible, and I was pretty sure it wasn't going to fly either. Then I brought it into their slicer to see what it would do with it, and what it did was it just covered the whole thing with supports. And sure enough, after this printed, it didn't fly at all. So next I tried 3D printing one of these airplanes with no modifications, and it wouldn't 3D print. Okay, it would 3D print, but the default design was too big to fit on the build plate of the XMaker Joy. It probably would have fit on the regular XMaker, but that meant that I needed to scale it down, which was also a problem I had with this one. All those Lego connectors, they won't hold on to actual Legos because now they're too small. But nevertheless, I scaled it down in the slicer, but there were 2 tasks on it. This is something in their slicer that's kind of interesting. If something has multiple build plates worth of prints, they put them in separate tasks. And it took me a little while to get used to this idea, to find these tasks. But you can actually go into the printer settings and just start the next task. Once I figured that out, it was much easier to use. But the problem was, I had to scale down the body, and then I had to scale down the other parts that would fit into the body. And I didn't know how much I had scaled the body by, because their slicer doesn't include any way to scale it by the numbers yet. So again, it's another edge case where it needs a little bit of work, but it means that this airplane project doesn't really work well on the XMaker Joy, though it would work fine on the regular XMaker. Next, I started playing with the X-Fun kit, and this has a lot of different projects. One of the coolest which is this little box of connectors to make these ball-jointed toys with. Now, I immediately recognized these articulated toys because they used to be a part of another app called Tinkerplay, which used to be a part of another app that was called, I think, Modio or something like that. I've had my eye on these toys for a very long time because at one point I was going to make some articulated toys, and then I found these and I'm like, I don't need to make them. This is way more complex. And then it went away, but then it got bought and it got made into an app, but then that went away, and now here it is again. But they've modified the design so that you can add these injection molded joints, which if you're printing with PLA is actually a really good thing, because the PLA joints, as I've already discovered in making ball joints for printer blocks, don't hold on quite as well and loosen up over time. So having at least the ball joints injection molded or out of a plastic that won't relax is a very good thing. So I chose one of the models, didn't spend a whole lot of time customizing it, and then put it together with the ball joints, and it worked not great. Part of the problem was that the body parts that were going on the outside as accessories were loose, and that was preventing a good connection. So put some super glue on them, made them nice and tight, and now it worked much, much better. For a little while anyways. I wanted to have this part sitting up here so that you guys could all gawk at it because it is super cool, but doggone it, it just keeps falling apart. I decided to experiment further and see if maybe the 3D printed ball joints would work better. And not only did they not work better, but I tried to print the Raptor model, which is a very cool looking model, but discovered that the head, which to my knowledge was new, was not oriented properly for 3D printing on the build plate, meaning that once again, it's another edge case that AOSeed has to do a little bit of work on to make sure that it's ready for prime time completely. I was able to fix it, and it's not that big a deal, but even after printing out, these joints not only did not remain tight, but the joints for the tail weren't tight to begin with. I feel like this model in particular needs to have another review. Nevertheless, if I were a kid, I would still be having a great time making and building these models, and even if they didn't last, it would occupy me. It occupied me for a little while, and I was still just having a ball. Next, I decided to try their car making app, and in the X-Fun kit, they have 3D printed bearings that you can put on the wheel. Now, the first one that I printed was practically the Batmobile, but I forgot to put the bearings in the wheels, so I decided to try another one. So I made this sort of, I don't know what it is, industrial tank steamroller thing. And what I discovered, I did some customization on this one. And first of all, they do a very good job of cleverly placing the joints so that they fold up flat and then fold out for snapping in. Secondly, you can add these parts to it anywhere that you want, and by default, they put these little fins on here in a place that would intersect the body, and while it put the holes in the right place, the fins wouldn't fit on there. Now, I recognized that and moved it over manually, and the holes moved over. So it's super cool. You can take these parts, put them anywhere, it'll put a hole wherever you want it, and that's super neat. But again, the design that they have by default needs to have just a little bit more review before they put it out there. But then after getting it all together and absolutely loving the clever design, I put the bearings on the wheels and the wheels on the bearings, and the wheels fell off the bearings. They're not quite tight enough. They need to have some little friction holds in there to make it so that they'll hold on a little bit tighter, or they need some glue. And again, this is a great project if you're going to hand it to a teen, because it has parts that needs a little bit of troubleshooting before it'll be done. But you know, the bearings are cool. Despite the slight imperfections in some of these designs, I was still having an absolute blast using the X-Maker Fun 3D printer. I was enjoying all of these projects and the creativity that they were engendering until I ran out of filament again. Yes, the kilogram spool that I put on there. I ran through the entire spool of filament, had to load on a new one, and had to go back to the app to load filament. And I was reminded why this headless 3D printer is just a little bit frustrating. Which leads me to my recommendation. Do I recommend the X-Maker Fun? Well, being a headless 3D printer, it's frustrating to use. And yes, it is cheaper, but it's definitely a case of you get what you pay for. I, however, would 100% recommend the X-Maker, not Joy, the regular X-Maker, and definitely get some of these kits to use and have a good time with, because this is where the real power in AOSeed is. These kits, the projects that they have on them, and the app that they've developed is stellar. It's absolutely phenomenal, and I cannot recommend their app and their kits enough, but I would prefer the X-Maker over the X-Maker Joy for doing it. That said, I am going to take this 3D printer and I am going to replace my toy box, because all of my kids are getting older, and I'm going to see how they enjoy using this 3D printer and the kits for it This is going to be my kid's 3D printer going forward. But that's it for this video. I want to thank you very much for watching, and I want to remind you that you are a child of God, so you're special to me. So take care of yourself. And if you can, someone else too. I'll see you next time.